Welcome to the Darkstream. This is VoxDay, voxday.blogspot.com, and I am trying to figure out what on earth I am doing. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is what looks like it could be the return of GamerGate. And what's interesting about this is that it is brought about by a game that you and I are all quite familiar with. And I'm going to give this a try here. So if you haven't seen this, this is the Battlefield 5 trailer. Now let me know if you are able to hear any of the sound. Are you seeing the... Let me know if you're seeing the trailer. This is Battlefield 5, the trailer that was released quite recently. And a couple of the striking things about it are the way in which that we have this figure here. It's, at first you're not sure what the time frame is, but then you realize there's World War II tanks. Some of the weapons are... And then also you realize, wait a minute, is that a woman riding on a Jeep on the battlefield? Now, and what is a Jeep doing suddenly surrounded by all of these tanks? And is that a... What kind of plane is that? I can't tell. It looked for a second like it might be some, might be some sort of Messerschmitt, like a Messerschmitt 109. But if you recall your World War II history, then you realize that Messerschmitt 109s were actually mostly used in air-to-air combat. They were not used in ground support. And you certainly were not shooting them down with machine guns and so forth. And so, what we're seeing here, and that was, if I recall correctly, that was actually a V1 buzz bomb rocket, which, again, you would not use on the battlefield. They were used for bombing civilian centers. Oh, and here we get rescued by a woman. A woman with a claw, no less. Interesting. So, a lot of people were not terribly impressed with this. And for good reason. What is the purpose of this game? What are they trying to demonstrate? Now, I understand, I think we all understand that a arcade game is not meant to be a serious World War II combat simulation. Okay. I played Modern Warfare 2 through level 70 Elite, and I also played the previous Battlefield, or two previous Battlefields. And the interesting thing about this is that we're seeing the same sort of behavior. We're seeing the same sorts of arguments from the producers that we were seeing when GamerGate first got started. And what we're seeing is the appeal to possibility. So what SJWs do is they come in and then they begin messing around with the history. They begin messing around with whatever they can in order to get the point across that they want to get across. And so it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a fantasy game. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about a World War II game. I mean, what's particularly egregious about this is that we all had the same response when they first came out with the remake of the old Dungeons and Dragons games. And so, but the argument then was, well, hey, it's fantasy. It's fantasy. So what does it matter if you can have dragons and you have flying dragons and breathing fire and all this sort of thing? Well, why can't you have women who are just as good at fighting as men? Well, the reason is because it's not consistent with the storylines. It's also not consistent with what the audience wants. And so now what we're seeing is that they're getting even more egregious. Now they are putting these women in the battlefield, and they are making them more heroic and more lethal than the men, as this particular trailer demonstrated. And they're using the excuse of saying, well, there were whacks and there were waves and there were Russian snipers and all that sort of thing. And that's all true. But none of that excuses what they're doing. All they're trying to do is come up with some sort of ex post facto rationalization for what they're doing. I've played dozens of World War II related games. You can look on my shelf right there. You can see I'm an advanced squad leader player. At no point in time in the extremely complicated advanced squad leader system, where they literally count the precise numbers and probability of appearance on the battlefield of the most obscure German, Romanian, and Russian tanks. At no point did they ever see any need to simulate women. I mean, they've got everything from the late war German militias that were, I think they called them the stomach battalions, because it was basically young kids and men who had previously been disqualified from service. And so they've even got that accounted for. My son and I are about to play Decision at Elst, which is the first ASL starter kit campaign game. And they've actually got special rules for steeples, because it's important for the actual physical characteristics of the territory where that was fought. Again, they're going to that level of detail, and yet there's been absolutely no need whatsoever to figure out how to simulate women in combat, in World War II combat. And so, this is a new level of egregious. This is a new level of SJW onslaught. This is a new offensive by SJWs in the game industry. And so, and the thing is, what's happening in games is much the same that as what's happening in television. Suddenly these period pieces are becoming more and more popular. Why? Because people don't want to see a bunch of diversity being forced on them. So they start watching things like Downton Abbey. So what do SJWs do, of course? Well, suddenly they bring in a jazz singer. In the case of games, you want to get away from the diversity and that sort of stuff. So you might go and play something like Kingdom Come. You might go and play a medieval game. You might play a World War II game. Well, suddenly SJWs are saying, well, we're not going to let you get away from it. You have to have diversity in your entertainment, even if it doesn't make any sense at all. And so, it's really egregious, and it's really obvious what they're doing. And the only way to make it clear to them that this is unacceptable is to simply refuse to buy it. I absolutely advise that you refrain from buying Battlefield, even if you're a fan of the franchise. And frankly, I don't think you're going to be missing too much based on how bad the last Battlefield games Call of Duty has been ruined. Battlefield has more or less been ruined. All of these games have been turned from what were originally conceived as being quasi, not realistic, but at least having some simulation aspects, and they've basically been turned into dumbed down arcade games. Now I'm an older gamer. My reflexes are not what they were, and so I don't find the Twitch games as fun anymore. So it's very easy for me to not bother with these games. Despite the fact that, like I said, I've been level 70 elite in Call of Duty. I've played through, I think it was Battlefield 2 and Battlefield 3. But I'm not gonna touch Battlefield 5. Despite the fact that I am a significant World War II buff. You can see a number of the Avalon Hill games right there. And the thing is that there's nothing wrong with what they are doing from a 50,000 foot view. If EA wants to make Band of Sisters, fine, go ahead. But see, what they're trying to do is they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to say, well, we want to do this ahistorical nonsense, and that trailer is full of ahistorical nonsense. I haven't bothered to sit down and actually analyze whether those particular tanks were ever on the battlefield at the same time as that particular Jeep, that particular German fighter. But I would not be at all surprised if we were to find out that it is completely ahistorical, because they don't care. To Electronic Arts, World War II is just another genre. It's just another genre for them to crap on and suck dry and abuse. And now this is kind of funny to me. The reason that this is kind of funny is that, believe it or not, I actually proposed and designed an initial design document for a World War II first-person shooter back in 1996. And I presented it to GT Interactive, and they told us that no one would ever have any interest in playing a game like that. So it's for me, it's very ironic to see this, 22 years later, and see it being not only a major release, but a major release that SJWs have felt the need to infect and try to ruin. Obviously it's such a desirable thing. It's such a fundamentally good idea that SJWs need to clam onto it and try to push their social justice nonsense on the entire gaming community, using it as a vehicle. So anyhow, that's the trailer. It's nonsense. It's absurd. It's more SJW crap. And what I think we're going to need to do is just continue to build our own institutions. There's a comment here. 1996 was long before Medal of Honor. In fact, when Medal of Honor and the original Call of Duty came out, I actually got a phone call from the guy who is been a very high-ranking executive at a number of companies, including EA, but at the time had been the executive producer at GT Interactive. And he said, hey, I guess we should have listened to you. Maybe GT wouldn't have gone out of business if they had, and they'd let you build that game. So, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. I can't complain. Anyhow, what I think that we may be seeing as a result of this is that we may be seeing that it is necessary to revive GamerGate. Now, it's going to be very different because in this case, we've got the actual developers and publishers who are actively pushing the SJW stuff instead of just the media. This is probably something that I'm going to talk about with Ethan of the Ralph Retort. He asked me to appear on his kill stream this coming week, and while I turned down most media requests, obviously I'm not going to turn down an old GamerGater, and so that's something that I think that we'll probably talk about. Anyhow, let's move on to the next subject, because I think I figured out how to work with this stuff here. I realized that leaving it in the live mode is not the way to do this stuff properly. But let me see if I got this right. Some of you are mentioning that we need alt media, we need alt movies, we need alt television. Well, one thing that we do have that I can mention is that we do have alt comics, and so this is a very small version here. I'll show you a larger one, but not 90 minutes ago, I pressed submit to the printer on the print version of Alt Hero #1 Crackdown. Let me show you now that we know that this works. I'm kind of psyched about that. Let me show you the larger version. And this is yeah, woohoo, it works. This is actually the front and back cover of our first print edition of Alt Hero #1. And so now one thing that you might notice is that we have a gold logo up there, and what the gold logo represents is it is one of the first 2,500 printed. And so if you pick it up quickly enough, I don't know how quickly they're going to sell out, but what I can say is that we already have one order for 1,000 units. So if you want to pick up a gold logo edition of Alt Hero #1, I would recommend doing so pretty quickly once we make the announcement. And I'll make an announcement here. And you're going to be able to get them from the Castelia Books Direct. Let me see if I can. Hey, there we go. Okay, so I can actually shrink that. So we're very excited about this. It's going to be potentially revolutionary with what we're doing. The best place to order is just go to my blog and go to voxday.blogspot.com, and then go ahead and click on Castelia Books Direct. And when you do that, you will be able to get as many of the comics. We've got our comics there. We've got our books there. All kinds of stuff. The backers do not get a copy of this. The backers get a digital edition, which they've already received. And then they also receive the collected version of these in either hardcover or paperback, depending on what they ordered. We did not know that it was even going to be possible for us to do single issue comics. so we had no idea. Anyhow, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. This is the first time we've done this. Fortunately, we have a little bit of experience producing comics now. Excuse me. But you know, so we're hoping that that our first print run is going to be solid, and we'll we'll take a look. Anyhow, and I think people are going to enjoy the hardcovers. The backers are going to be getting special versions that have different covers than the hardcovers and paperbacks that will be made available to everybody else. So that's just something else to keep in mind. We're not, just to make it clear, we are not selling the hardcovers or the paperbacks that will go to the backers. You know, we've made it very clear that we're not going to do that. So there's no need to order them now. I'll let you know as soon as they're available. And if you follow this channel, or if you read the blog, or if you subscribe to the Castelia newsletter, the new release newsletter, you will know about it as soon as they're available. You'll know about it before they get to the retail stores anywhere. The hardcovers, these collections are going to be a while because each hardcover and paperback is 6 of one of these issues, and we've just released the first one. So, so it's going to take a while. I mean, this is a process that takes time. Okay, that's all I can say. So, and let me see if I can actually load up a new source here. This will be interesting experiment. Try adding something new. Hopefully you're not staring at my screen going, what on earth are you doing? I just want to see if I can show off. Yeah, here, let me see if I can show off the cover of issue number 2. Can anyone see? Let me know if you can see the cover of issue number 2. I'm genuinely curious about whether I can do this or not. Are you seeing a separate cover, a different cover for Alt Hero now? Okay, excellent. Yeah, so this is the cover of Alt Hero number 2, which is called Rebel's Cell. And of course, it will be introducing our character Rebel. And so, anyhow, I'd encourage you all to sign up for the mailing list, because that's the best way to find out about these things as soon as possible. And if you enjoy these live streams, you know, please just continue to tune in. And so it'll be interesting to see how these are received when they come out. But you know, the initial response to the digital edition has been excellent, and we're coming in at a very affordable price point at $2.99. And so you know, we're very optimistic that this is going to revolutionize the comics industry in more ways than one. So I'll repeat my previous message, which is Battlefield 5 is SJW infested. Give it a pass. Alt Hero number 1 is coming out in print later this week. And we have Alt Hero number 2 on the way. So have a good evening, and we will see you soon.